Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Call of Duty. What have you stepped in today? Well, not you, your devs, because as they've all made clear in their bios, the opinions are their own and not of Mother Activision's. Anyways, if you are unaware of the latest controversy to come from Call of Duty, it all starts at the Game Awards. One Christopher Judge, aka the voice actor for Kratos, opened the ceremonies with this remark.
No 8-minute speech like last year, but fun fact, my speech was actually longer than this year's Call of Duty campaign. What?
And yeah, pretty decent joke. Not the best. Like, there are some others, but as far as setting the mood and lightening the room, I think he did a fantastic job. And guess what, folks? Those may not even have been his words, because a lot of times you work with a writer when you're on stage like that in order to craft these jokes. So even some of the hate that has been directed towards him may not need to really be focused towards him, because, well, he didn't write the words. He's just being paid to say the words. But anyways, with all of that said, and what they decided to do was fire back on Twitter, and with what they said, I think it shows a full-on concerning pattern at Activision, if not something that is just outright toxic there. So I feel like we need to talk about it, because it was absolutely insane. Now, I will say that at the time of recording, all three of these people have removed the tweets from the internet. I guess things don't last on the internet forever, except they do because there are screenshots. So let's just dive on in. Now, before we go into all of this, I want to just talk a little bit about myself, so you know where I'm coming from for this, so you understand that I do have a sort of leg to stand on what I'm all about to say. Personally, I've worked on a large project that, you know, has a ravenous fan base, and then deployed a project that took years of my life away from me and had it absolutely hated, mocked, and, you know, it being decried as the worst thing in the world, and still is to this day. So I know where these devs have been. I know the feelings associated with what they're doing, and it is never fun to, you know, have your failures so publicly shown. Let's call it at that. But we need to talk about this, so we're going to talk about it. Now, the first category of these tweets I'm going to call the engagement category, because, well, it just points to a toxicity within Activision that is absolutely insane. So the first one is by a fella named AJ. He's IDDQD_AJ over on X/Twitter. And he says, funny, but yeah, the metrics that COD absolutely destroys all of the COD of War games, probably combined, TBH, is also equally laughable, if not more. AJ, we have a couple of things to discuss. One of those games is a single-player game that is a console exclusive, and yes, it's the largest console, but Call of Duty does kind of reside on multiple consoles, so the numbers are traditionally going to get skewed towards the multi-platform game. Just a little thing to think about. But let's get to the other, and we'll dive into others. The other one is from Tickle Matter on Twitter, which just a choice of a username there. But imagine having short user engagement once your game is consumed. Can't relate. #Game Awards. And you can see the sort of narrative thread that both of these are diving into. And well, this points to two realities that I think these tweets could be coming from. The first one, and I think this would be the funnier one if they are just this deep into sipping the Kool-Aid, is they have such a short campaign that so many more users finished it this year than ever before, and they they're looking at their spreadsheets and they're like, yeah, man, we did it. Most number of players have ever completed a Call of Duty campaign. And they are just celebrating that because, that's what the numbers say. The user engagement is high. Wins for all. Break out the champagne. If there's if there's company bonuses associated to retention and things, everyone gets their bonus because they made a short campaign and people finished it. That's one world. The other world is, I think, the one that's closer to reality, and it's the fact that, yes, Call of Duty, naturally, is going to have better user engagement than God of War. And do you know why? Because that's the design directive you made for the game. You've targeted Call of Duty to be hyper engaging, to suck up the lives of the users, where God of War set out to tell a story. Now, I know which one I would prefer to play. A story that has a full-on, beginning, middle, end, not just beginning question mark, because that's sort of what Call of Duty delivered this year. And maybe they will deliver a couple bit more of story through the year. So if you don't, stay engaged with it, you don't get the full story. That's not great design there, Call of Duty. Just magically resurrecting people that were in tanks. South America.
Well, I wasn't in that tank.
Anyways, I'll digress because it's clear that, the objectives of the team that made God of War are a bit different than the objectives that have made Call of Duty. But there is one other interesting remark we got from the devs. And before we dive into it, I will just have to say, this is the only dev who, acknowledged that they took down their tweet and showed any sort of contrition. So good on her for showing actual leadership and the ability to admit when they're wrong, because that's something we don't really get to see very often, and it's a nice breath of fresh air, and it makes someone more likable when they're able to realize their own faults. Just saying. Anyways, what this third dev, Darcy Sandal, said is, honestly, as a COD developers, we've heard way worse, but we don't expect it from a peer at an event that's supposed to be celebrating this year's achievements in gaming, especially with all the information that was leaked about its development. And yes, that makes sense. Game Awards, it's all about celebrating the industry, though I think one thing to remember is Call of Duty is this Goliath. And when you have this Goliath that has more studios and more people working on it than pretty much anything else in the gaming industry, and it falters, and its faltering is going to allow so many more games to succeed because it's going to open up more people's free time and things like that. People want to dig in because what? For years, people have been like, "Hey, Call of Duty needs this. Call of Duty needs this," and we've seen what right now is the lowest point of a reviewed COD, and people, I'm sorry, are going to celebrate that just because that's sort of human nature, and that's just the way it's going to work. The other thing she touches on that I think is very important is the incredibly short time frame. If you're not aware, Bloomberg published a report that said basically Treyarch had to develop all of this in 18 months, which, yeah, it feels like it, but here's the thing. That doesn't take away from the fact that the narrative told was not a great narrative. And by what I mean by that, the narrative quality in Call of Duty has just dropped off a cliff precipitously. I will say the first Modern Warfare 2019 was incredible. I absolutely loved that game. The stories they told, the missions that they brought to life. It was, I think, the best Call of Duty campaign in years, and honestly, it's been my favorite since the original Modern Warfare trilogy. And what they brought showed that, hey, guess what? Call of Duty's goddamn back. And then we get into 2, which I didn't appreciate the direction they took to, but at least there was a decent campaign within that, and then we get to 3. And spoilers ahead. Let's clear it out. Spoilers ahead for this 4-hour campaign. But what happened? Like, what narratively drove the story forward? And really, I can only point to 2 events in the campaign that had any consequences on the entire world, which should not be the way a story takes place. In the first mission, Makarov escapes from prison. Okay. In the last mission, someone dies. Those are the only 2 events of consequence that occur through the entire campaign. Let's compare that now to, I don't know, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the original, not the new one, because anyways, let's compare that to that, where the narrative consequences of that game changed the world, right? You went through No Russian, and that caused a world war between America and Russia. Where are those narrative stakes being delivered in this new Call of Duty campaign? Look, I understand you want to drive Call of Duty forward, but the way that, even when you have such a short campaign, the way it needs to be designed is that stakes have been raised. I think a lot more people would have been more forgiving on this game if something actually occurred. We technically got a No Russian style mission, but then we cleaned it up in the world, doesn't really know about it. No, there needed to be actual consequences for that mission, or else what you've accomplished in the narrative hasn't done anything. That's the problem with the current Call of Duty campaign, is you didn't do nothing. That's just sadly where it's at. We can talk about other things, like something I noticed is like, in this Call of Duty campaign, there's an AC-130 mission, and we're all like, okay, we're very familiar with AC-130 missions, but I can't remember an AC-130 mission where you didn't first play on the ground beforehand and then get to see the AC-130 blow something up on the ground before taking over the AC-130. You know why we do that? Because it establishes narrative stakes to that preceding mission. If you just open up with fly around up in the sky and blow shit up, it doesn't have the same stakes of, oh, I was just those players, and I also got to see from a ground level how big those explosions were. That just wasn't delivered. I don't get it. Anyways, guys, with all that said, Call of Duty devs, maybe they've learned their lesson, maybe they've not, who knows, but I wanted to make this video because, well, one, I think it's important to talk about just where Call of Duty let us down this year, and also get a glimpse to see that, at least certain people within the studio don't see that problem whatsoever. Anyways, guys, if you liked the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. See ya.